Hello, cavemen. Tonight we will continue with how the disabled survived in the Stone Age, and more. The wind howls over the ridge like it's angry at your existence. Snow crunches beneath your feet, but not like the others' feet. Yours drag a little. One leg doesn't bend the way it should. It pulls when you walk, like a stubborn branch stuck in the earth. But you walk anyway, because you have to, because the group is moving, because in this life, the only thing more dangerous than a wild animal is being left behind. Your breath is short, white steam curling upward into the cold sky. You press forward, following the line of firs ahead of you. Behind, your tracks form a crooked line in the snow, not neat, not fast, but real. And the person behind you doesn't push or groan. They just step carefully in your steps, keeping the rhythm slower together. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the clan, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The world you live in has no crutches, no wheelchairs, no ramps, but that doesn't mean you don't move. It just means you move differently, and in your clan, they've learned to move with you. Mainstream fact, one of the most famous sets of ancient footprints, discovered at a site called La Roselle in France, shows an individual with an unusual gait, likely caused by a physical impairment. Their tracks wind alongside those of others, not behind, not abandoned, just walking together. Historians still argue whether such individuals were slowed down out of compassion or necessity, but the evidence, it's there. Someone limped, others stayed with them. That says something. You feel the ache in your hip again, a throb, dull and deep. It's been that way since the injury during the mammoth chase seasons ago. You shouldn't have gone, you knew that, but you wanted to try. The fall shattered part of you, but the others, they didn't shatter with you. Instead of exile, you got help. Someone made you a new walking stick from young ashwood, tough and light. Someone else added strips of hide at the top so your hand wouldn't blister. They carved a spiral into it. Decorative, thoughtful, not pity, care. Quirky tidbit. Ancient walking aids may not have been rare. A 45,000-year-old skeleton from Shanidar Cave, belonging to an individual with a withered arm and a deformed leg, shows signs of survival into middle age. That means someone like you, damaged, slowed, was fed, protected, and moved with. And here's the kicker. That trail you left earlier, that crooked dragging set of tracks, it's evidence that you lived, that you moved, that someone slowed down enough to leave footprints beside yours. It's easy to think of the Stone Age as merciless, as a time when the weak were culled for the benefit of the strong. But your body, aching, imperfect, and still in motion, is a rebuttal to that myth. You remember a time last winter when food was scarce, when the hunt failed and hunger settled into every corner of the cave. You were the one who couldn't hunt, couldn't chase, but you could repair spears. You could shape flint better than most. You made a new blade that pierced a bison's hide. And when the meat came home, the man who used your weapon gave you the first piece. Because here usefulness isn't just speed or strength. It's contribution. It's presence. It's walking through the snow, crooked, slow, and never alone. So tonight, as the wind dies down and your stick sinks slightly with each step, you press forward, not at the front, but not at the end. You walk beside them, and they beside you. Because in this world, your body may be broken, but your place in the clan is whole. You were born with one leg shorter than the other. Maybe it wasn't obvious at first. You were just a baby pink, loud, squirming like any other. But over time, your crawl looked different. Your first steps were lopsided. You fell more, you cried more, and the elders watched. In many worlds, maybe even yours, today, this might have been a bad sign, a defect, something whispered about, something that meant you'd be a burden, before you were even a person. But in your clan, things work differently. Because here, being born crooked doesn't mean you're broken. It just means they'll have to raise you carefully. You still remember how your mother carried you longer than the others, how she wrapped your legs at night with warm hides and ash paste, hoping it would straighten them out. It didn't, but she didn't stop holding you, didn't stop singing to you by the fire. And you remember how the other children at first ran ahead without thinking, but one of them always stayed behind, sat beside you when you fell, handed you sticks, laughed when you tripped, but never mocked. Because that's how the clan works. You are not expected to become a hunter if you can't run, but you are expected to become something. Mainstream fact. Evidence from the remains of children with congenital deformities, like the famous child from Kavza in Israel, who had a serious brain abnormality, suggests these children were not abandoned or left to die. They were buried with care, sometimes with objects like antlers or tools, indicating value. Historians still argue whether this care came from emotional attachment, spiritual belief, or social function. But whatever the reason, they mattered. And you mattered too. You learnt to make fish traps before the others, not because you were more clever, just because you spent more time near the river while they chased rabbits in the hills. You tied reeds together with sinew. You laid them in still pools. And when the adults came back empty-handed, your trap was full. That was the first time the chief nodded at you. Not pity, respect. Quirky insight. In some indigenous cultures, even today, those born with physical differences are thought to possess special connections to nature or to the spiritual world. It's not a curse, it's a mark, a signal that this person may see or sense what others miss. That didn't make life easy. The other kids still ran faster, climbed better, but you began to notice things they didn't. Where the flint napped just right, which roots softened faster when soaked in stream water, how to heat animal glue without burning it. You became the observer, the questioner. You couldn't carry a carcass, but you could remember where it was buried. You couldn't bend your leg well, but you could bend the clan's future in directions no one else saw coming. And so they raised you, not to be like the others, but to be you. No one asked you to pretend your limp wasn't there. They just made sure it didn't stop you. You learned to walk differently, then to move differently, then to think differently. And by the time you were grown, that same short leg had carved a long path, one no one else could have walked. Because being born imperfect in the Stone Age didn't always mean you were destined to suffer. Sometimes it meant you were destined to lead from a different place. The snow is soft today, which is both a blessing and a curse. It cushions your steps. That's good. Your bad ankle doesn't protest quite as much when the earth beneath it gives a little. But it also means your walking stick sinks, and every few meters you have to yank it free like a bone caught in mud. Behind you, the group is quiet. Everyone is tired. It's the third migration day in a row. But no one has asked you to keep up, because they already made their choice. They'd rather slow down than leave you behind. You are not fast. That's not news to anyone. You hobble, you lean. Some days, if the wind is cruel and your joints are stiff, you can't even carry your own bundle. But that doesn't mean you're not moving. You just move with help. Someone always carries part of your load. Someone always checks your footing. Someone always watches you from behind, just in case. And if you ask them why, they say because you would do it for us. And they're right. You've tended wounds, cooked when the hunters came home exhausted. You were the one who pulled the arrowhead from Tuhuk's thigh after the bison gored him. The one who boiled roots into a paste to ease the fever. The one who wrapped broken fingers and checked them in the night. Mainstream fact. Skeletal remains like Shanidar 1, a Neanderthal man with a withered arm, blind in one eye, and a partially amputated leg, show that he lived for years after his injuries. Someone fed him, washed him, protected him. He didn't survive alone. Historians still debate whether this was a sign of compassion or interdependence. But let's be honest, compassion and survival are not opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. And sometimes help comes not from pity, but from ritual. Quirky cultural note. Some early groups practiced a kind of carrying honor. Taking care of someone, especially someone injured or disabled, was considered a strength. If you could carry another person, it meant you were capable. If you were worth carrying, it meant you were important. Today you are that person. You still remember the day after your fall, the bad one. You slipped near the edge of a river crossing. Your leg twisted wrong. You couldn't stand. You were certain they would leave you. The leader knelt beside you. She didn't speak, just pulled her own fur from her shoulders, tied it under your arms and nodded. Then 2 others joined her. They built a sling between them, with spears and rope, and you were carried, not as dead weight, but like a member of the group, with a place worth protecting. Even now your heart remembers that moment more vividly than the pain, because that's when you knew. You were not an extra. You were not in the way. You were a thread in the cloth. Pull that thread, and it all begins to unravel. So you walk, slowly, imperfectly, but you walk with them. Because being disabled in the Stone Age didn't always mean being weak. Sometimes it meant being the proof that humanity was already more than muscle. You recognize the cave before anyone else does, not because you remember its shape, but because you remember the stone, the way the rock slopes inward like a heavy brow. The faint red ochre smears still visible at the entrance, and most of all, the markings scratched low on the left wall, right where a child could reach. One of those markings is yours, because this is the cave you lived in after the accident. You were 15, too old to be useless, too young to be considered a true elder. But when your hip shattered from that fall, you couldn't walk for moons. Everyone assumed you would fade, that you'd stop eating, that the cold would find a way in through your bones and take what the mammoth didn't. But that's not what happened. Instead, they made room. Someone cleared space beside the fire. Someone adjusted the bedding so you wouldn't roll onto the bad side. Someone carved you a crutch, not fancy, just functional. And someone, maybe 2 or 3 someones, made sure you were never alone. That's why this cave matters. Because this was the cave with the crutch. Mainstream fact. At the site of El Cidrón in Spain, researchers discovered Neanderthal remains with signs of long-term impairment. But what stood out was the modification of nearby tools and shelter layouts, suggesting that some spaces were adapted for slower, seated, or less mobile members. Historians still argue whether these changes were intentional accommodations or just coincidence. But to those who've ever needed help moving across stone floors, it doesn't feel like a coincidence. It feels like care. You hobble inside now, leaning into the coolness, and breathe in the thick air. It smells of dust and old smoke, of ash soaked into stone. But to you, it smells like survival. That winter, you couldn't hunt, you couldn't gather, you couldn't even leave the cave, but you could work. You shaped arrowheads, with one leg stretched stiff before you, surrounded by a scatter of flint and bone. You taught a child how to carve without slicing their thumb. You listened, really listened, to the elders' tales, then told them again to others who hadn't heard them the first time. You didn't run the fires. You didn't lead the walks, but you centered the space. Quirky find. In a remote site near Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered a hearth with an unusual ring of low stones and a series of shallow indentations in the cave floor, believed to be seating or resting spots for individuals who spent extended periods near the flames. Some think it was for disabled or elderly clan members. Others call it coincidence. But if you've ever had a shattered hip, you know exactly what it was. You walk to the same corner you used to claim. Your hand brushes the wall, where your crutch once leaned. You find the scratch again, your mark, crooked, jagged, but there, a vertical line with 2 notches. You had no word for me, so you made one. Someone behind you laughs. You were always bad at drawing, they say. You smile, because even then, when your leg was wrapped in hide and pain, you still wanted to leave something behind. Not a legacy, not a masterpiece, just a proof of presence. Being impaired didn't mean being invisible. It meant carving your place into the world, one small scratch at a time. That winter, you taught the others how to make glue from boiled antler marrow. You found the right ratio of ash and sap to seal spears against wind and water. And when the fire burned low, it was your idea to pack ash inside a hollow bone and keep it glowing longer. You didn't move far, but your ideas moved everywhere. When spring came, and your leg could finally bear a little weight, you limped out of the cave and into the sunlight. And the first thing you saw was a child using your walking stick as a toy sword. You didn't yell, you just smiled. Because that stick, just like this cave, had done its job. It had carried you through the winter. And in a world where survival means motion, someone with a limp shouldn't have lived. But you did, because someone carved a crutch, because someone sat beside you, because this cave remembered what you gave back. Your hand tightens around the handle of the tool, not a weapon, but something better, a bone chisel, shaped for leverage, polished from use, the handle wrapped in bark, soft enough not to bite into your palm. You didn't make it, someone else did, and they made it for you. Because after the fall, after the limp became permanent, you needed to do things differently. And your clan understood that. They didn't ask you to swing spears, or haul meat, or run across the tundra after reindeer, but they didn't let you sit idle either. Instead, they gave you something even older than fire, tools. You sit beside the hearth again, just like you did that winter, and work the chisel along a sliver of antler, a bead maybe, or a hook for a net. You're not sure yet. You'll know when it's finished. That's the way these things work. Mainstream fact. Archaeological sites like Dolny Vestonuca show signs of early adaptive craftsmanship, including tools small enough for seated use and work areas arranged around hearths, likely for individuals who couldn't move far. Historians still argue whether these tools were truly adaptive or simply small by nature. But when you've seen a man with a ruined spine carve perfect arrowheads without leaving his bedding, it's hard not to call it by its name, survival engineering. The beauty of the Stone Age is that it didn't ask everyone to do everything. It just asked everyone to do something, and tools made that possible. You remember the day your cousin carved your first scraper handle to suit your weak grip. It had a curve so you could push instead of pull. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. And the next day they made another, better, smaller, yours. Quirky insight. Some early artifacts suggest left-handed or single-handed use. Custom-shaped tools, made for individuals with asymmetric muscle development or missing limbs. Were they disabled or just different? The point is, someone made tools for a specific body. That means someone saw that body as worth adapting for. You blow the dust from the bone and hold it up. Still rough. Still not perfect. Just like you. But usable. That's the whole point of a tool, after all. To make the impossible possible. Not for everyone, just for you. Because what the Stone Age lacked in medicine, it made up for in ingenuity. You didn't need a metal brace or a prosthetic knee. You just needed a clan that knew how to shape a stick into a crutch, a rock into a hammer, a knot of bark into a grip you could hold. Someone hands you a string of sinew. You nod, tie it tight around the end of the chisel, adjust, test the balance. It's good. You pass it to the child next to you. They grin, then begin scraping a fresh hide. The tool moves well. They glance back at you once, not for praise, just acknowledgement. Then they keep going. You don't need applause. You've learnt something quieter, something deeper, that the best tools aren't always the sharpest. Sometimes they're the ones that keep people connected. Your body doesn't move like it used to, but your hands, your mind, still sharp, still useful, still carving the world one stroke at a time. The snow has stopped, but the cold lingers like a stubborn guest that won't take the hint. You crouch by the fire pit, feeding it slow-burning chunks of dry dung and brittle bark. The flames hiss, then settle into a soft glow. Your hands hover over the warmth, the stiff joints grateful for a bit of mercy. Outside, the hunters are preparing. They've got their spears, their painted faces, their serious voices that come out only when the stakes are high and the meat is far away. You used to be one of them, or at least you used to pretend you could be. But after the fall, the chase stopped being your world. Now you're the one who stays. And that, it turns out, matters more than anyone talks about. Mainstream fact: in many prehistoric sites, researchers have uncovered fire pits and hearths that show signs of continuous tending, ashes layered, embers banked carefully, materials placed precisely. Someone had to stay and keep those fires alive, not just during the night, but sometimes for days. Historians still argue whether this role was assigned to elders, women, or those unable to hunt, but the consistent presence of home fire caretakers suggests one thing clearly: stationary survival was just as important as the mobile kind. You watch the group head out. They disappear into the pale trees, quick and quiet. You are not with them. You are not less than them. You are simply doing a different job, because hunting doesn't just require speed, it requires return. And for that, someone must be waiting. You add another layer of hide to the shelter entrance. You check the flint stash. You rearrange the drying herbs. You listen for the sounds of injury, because every hunter leaves camp hoping they'll return whole, but not all of them do. And when they don't, they come to you, with twisted ankles, with split lips, with bites they don't talk about but can't hide. And you know what to do. That's your hunt now. Not the deer, not the mammoth, but the moment when someone stumbles through the cold and collapses at the fire you've kept burning, and you save them. You remember when Kra came back missing 2 fingers. His face was pale, but his pride was worse. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. So you sat beside. You didn't say anything either, just placed a bowl of bone broth by his feet, and your own hand, equally damaged, on your knee, where he could see it. He didn't talk that night, but he ate. The next day, he sharpened a spear with his one good hand. Slowly, awkwardly, but with intent. Quirky tidbit: there's evidence from burial sites that weapons were sometimes buried with individuals who may not have been active hunters, suggesting that being a hunter wasn't just about ability. It was an identity shared among the group, a symbol of belonging. Even if you couldn't chase, you were still part of the hunt. And you shape the spears now. You test the tips, bind the heads, balance the weight. The others trust your hands more than their own, because your hands have nothing to prove, only something to pass on. The wind kicks up. You duck inside the hide tent. It's warm now. The fire crackles. The herbs simmer. The weapons glint in their orderly row. You're not chasing anything today. But when they return, bloody and laughing, or broken and pale, they'll come back to something safe. To you. To the firekeeper. Because surviving the hunt, that's hard. But keeping the world ready for when they return, that's harder. And you've made it your art. You hear them before you see them. The crunch of snow, the huff of breath, the shuffle of boots too tired to lift. You lean forward, pushing back the flap of the shelter. The hunters are returning, some dragging meat, some dragging themselves. And one of them isn't walking. They carry her between them, her leg bound in bark splints, her face set in a grimace that tries hard not to be a scream. She won't say it, but you know it. She can't go out again. Not for moons. Maybe not ever. You step aside to let them pass. You don't ask questions. You just make space. Because you remember. It's strange, isn't it? How when you're left behind, you think you're being forgotten. But in truth, the ones who stay are the ones who remember how to receive. She lies where you once did, on the softest furs near the fire. And just like you, she flinches when the fire snaps too loud. You offer her a carved bone cup of warm water. She doesn't thank you, but she doesn't refuse it either. Mainstream fact. Across various prehistoric sites, signs of long-term injury healing suggest not just survival, but sustained care. For someone to recover from a broken leg without infection, without antibiotics, they had to stay still, be fed, and be defended from predators or cold. That required others to pause their routines. Historians still argue whether these acts were driven by emotional bonds or utilitarian survival, if the injured were cared for because they were family or simply because they might be useful later. But if you've ever sat next to someone as they cried through the night in pain, you know usefulness doesn't explain everything. You pass her your old crutch. She eyes it warily. "I thought you burned this," she mutters. "I thought I'd never need it again," you reply. She laughs, just once, short and bitter, but it's something. The next day, you stay behind with her. You don't speak much, you sharpen things. She watches. You show her how to whittle without pressure on her bad leg. She tries, fails, tries again. Eventually you show her how to bind sticks into a small fence to keep ash from blowing into drying meat. It's not much, but it's something to do when you can't run. Quirky fact. A recent dig uncovered a series of low woven screens positioned around a fire pit. Some believe they were windbreaks. Others think they were made to help seated individuals cook or tend fires more comfortably, maybe even crafted by those individuals. You build one together, slowly, carefully, without urgency. She still hurts, but she's no longer just the one who got hurt. She's the one who stayed, and as she learns to sit without shame, to speak without apology, you notice something that makes you smile. She's telling stories now, repeating things she heard from the elders, twisting the endings, making the children laugh. You remember that moment well. It's the moment you realized you weren't just surviving. You were redefining what it meant to belong, not as the runner, not as the strongest, but as the one who remains when the world keeps moving, because every tribe needs someone who keeps the center steady. And today, that's you and her. You look up, the sky's turning pink. The others will return soon, cold, hungry, full of half-truths about how big the prey was. And they'll find the fire lit, the furs arranged, the fence shielding the meat, the stories already beginning. Because the hunt never ends. Even when you stay behind. It's raining today. Not a soft drizzle, the kind poets like to walk through, but a bone-chilling, mud-churning deluge, the kind that tests the strength of every shelter stitch, every fur pelt, every brittle knee. You shift your weight to keep the pressure off your bad leg. The pain hums beneath your skin, a reminder that joints don't care about weather reports. They are the weather reports. And today's forecast, miserable, with a high chance of emotional unraveling. But even as the storm pounds above, you're not alone. She's next to you, crutch tucked under one arm, hair tied back with sinew, her fingers busy weaving cord from strips of sinew and bark. Her hands are better than yours now, faster, more precise. She's quiet, but her eyes are focused, fierce. You trained her well. Mainstream fact. Archaeological digs show evidence of complex cord making and basket weaving techniques from as early as 27,000 years ago. Some of these crafts were intricate and time-consuming, likely done while seated and by individuals less physically mobile. Historians still argue whether these crafts were reserved for women or shared across genders, but what's not debated is that they were essential. Without cord, no shelter stands. Without baskets, no food is stored. Without knots, everything falls apart. Kind of like people. You hand her a new strip of bark. She doesn't even look, just takes it and keeps working. You feel a flicker of pride. Then the wind howls, and the roof creaks, and suddenly the fire flickers. One side of the hide wall collapses inward, and for a moment you panic. But she's already moving. She grabs a support pole, slams it back into place, ties it with the very cord she's been weaving all morning. You stare as the shelter stabilizes, water still leaking in, but at least not collapsing. She grins, wild and smug. Didn't think I'd be good for storms, did you? You shake your head, smiling. I hoped you would be, you say. Didn't know yet. And now you do. Quirky note, some scholars believe that certain knots found in ancient settlements were named after the people who invented or used them, suggesting that disabled individuals might have had signature methods of crafting or reinforcing tools, shelters, or even ceremonial objects. You and she might not be able to chase game anymore, but you can build walls, tie binding, reinforce everything that the rain tries to tear down. And when night falls, and the others return soaked and shivering, they'll find the fire still going, the roof holding, the stories waiting, because the disabled didn't survive by being protected. They survived by becoming indispensable. You move a bit closer to the fire. Your joints complain, but you ignore them. You're used to the chorus of pain now. It plays quietly beneath every task. And somewhere between the sharp aches and the soft embers, you've found your rhythm. You're not the fastest. You're not the strongest. But you are the one who builds what others rest under. And sometimes that makes you the most important person in the clan, even if no one says it out loud. The morning after the storm smells like damp ash and mossy regret. Everything's soggy. Your fur blanket, your left foot, your mood. Even the sky looks hungover, grey and sullen, refusing to apologize. But there's work to do. Always is. Today, it's the meat racks. The last hunt brought in more than expected, 2 deer and a boar, and the clan wants it all dried before mould becomes the newest clan member. You shuffle toward the racks, dragging your foot like it owes you money. The splinters in the support beams need pulling, the cords need retightening, and someone needs to make sure the meat hangs evenly. That someone, of course, is you. Because even in the Stone Age, there's something about being the one who notices what's crooked and quietly makes it straight. Mainstream fact, archaeological evidence from sites like Catalhoyuk shows that food storage and drying weren't afterthoughts. They were central to survival. Carefully layered racks, smoke channels, and preserved bones all point to organized, long-term planning. Historians still argue whether food preservation was a specialized role or just something everyone pitched in for. But what's clear is this: somebody had to mind the racks, watch the sky, feel the wind, and declare, today's a drying day. And today, that's you. You check the first row of venison strips. Too low, 1 turn of the cord, 1 tug of a knot, and now it won't catch the ground when the winds pick up. The second row, almost perfect, just one end slipping. You adjust it. It holds. Sometimes you wonder if this is all you are now, the fixer of the little things. But then you remember the day the last storm blew through, when the meat spoiled and the tribe went hungry for 3 days. That time, no one had checked the racks. No one had tied the cords. That's not happening again. Quirky fact, some ancient rack systems were built near fire pits, not just for preservation, but because someone figured out that smoke kept the bugs away. No scientific degrees, just observation, patience, and maybe a little desperation. You grin as the wind shifts and carries the scent of meat toward you. Smoke curls up. The dogs begin to whine, always, the first to know when the feast is near. And that's when she appears again. Crutch under arm, face smudged, holding a chunk of dried sinew. "Need more ties?" she asks. You nod. She gets to work beside you, silent, steady, and for a moment you remember when you were the one learning, when knots felt like puzzles, when chords felt like too much to wrap your swollen fingers around. But now your fingers move without thinking. Yours are the hands that teach, the hands that test, the hands that make sure things hold. You're not just surviving here, you're the anchor of the tribe's winter, the one who ensures there's something to chew on when the storms don't stop, the one who understands the value of predictability in a world that throws mammoths and fevers without warning. And though no one sings songs about the Rak Guy, you suspect they might one day, because the future doesn't arrive because of heroes. It arrives because someone kept the meat dry. You're woken by whispers, not voices, those you could ignore. These are child whispers, sticky, giggly, rule-breaking whispers, and they're coming from just outside the shelter. You sit up slowly, bones clicking like wind chimes made of regret, and crawl toward the flap. There, silhouetted against the rising sun, are two tiny silhouettes poking the firewood pile. You don't say anything. You just grunt, loud enough to startle them, but not so loud that you have to actually stand. They squeal, trip over each other, and tumble backward into the snow. You hear one say, "He's awake," like they just escaped a bear's den. Then they scramble off, laughing all the way to their mothers. You smile to yourself, because even when your legs betray you, your reputation still stands. Mainstream fact. In early hunter-gatherer societies, elders and disabled individuals often played key roles in childcare and oral storytelling. They preserved traditions, taught survival through tales, and provided oversight when parents were away or hunting. In some tribes, their word was law, and bedtime stories were survival guides. Historians still argue whether these roles were formalized or instinctual, but there's no doubt that the presence of older or injured individuals enriched cultural memory. You settle back by the fire, sipping bone broth, and moments later they return. This time they're not sneaking. They're carrying two small baskets, awkwardly, proudly, and one says, "We brought dry moss." It's a peace offering. You nod, taking it. The moss is half wet, clumsily packed, and entirely wrong for fire starting. But you smile anyway, because now it's not just you and her. Now it's you, her, and them. You spend the morning teaching the kids how to tell wet from dry without setting the hut on fire. She watches you work with them and mouths a silent, sarcastic, "You're a natural." You roll your eyes, and then the real lesson begins. You ask them to gather sticks, curved ones, stiff ones, long ones. You show them how to snap them by feel, how to tie two together into a frame, how to test if it'll hold a wet hide. Quirky fact, some of the earliest toys discovered in prehistoric sites weren't just for play. They were training tools, miniature bows, animal figurines, small baskets, child-sized versions of adult gear, meant to prepare little hands for future burdens. One of the kids asks, "Why do you know all this?" You pause. The answer is simple, "Because I had to." She adds, "And now you get to teach it." That part hadn't hit you before. She's right. There's a strange shift that happens when you stop being the broken one and start being the one who passes things on. Like a torch, or a story, or a knot that never slips. You feel the warmth of the fire behind you. The kids pile moss, like it's treasure. One of them asks if you'll tell a story later. You nod, Because survival isn't just blood and bone and weather, it's memory. And today you remember how far you've come, not just in distance, but in identity, from outcast to elder to legend in the making. Later that evening, you sit cross-legged near the hearth, back braced against a wall of woven reeds, and the children are sprawled around you like sleepy wolves. The fire crackles softly, sparks drift lazily upward, catching in the smoke hole like tiny stars too lazy to rise. They want a story, of course they do, and you give them one. Not the epic kind, no roaring mammoths or sky gods tonight. No, this one is about a boy who couldn't run. Mainstream fact. Researchers have uncovered burial sites containing individuals with severe deformities or degenerative conditions, some of whom lived well into adulthood. These graves were often ornate, with tools, beads, and signs of reverence. In other words, disability didn't exclude someone from legacy. It often amplified it. So he begins to listen. He listens to the wind in the leaves. He listens to how animals walk when they're tired. He notices which plants bloom just before the first snow. He learns the language of patterns and then teaches it to the others. In your story, the boy is always last to the hunt. He can't carry the kill. He can't climb trees. The others laugh. They forget him. They stop teaching him. The kids around you are silent now. One is chewing his thumbnail, eyes wide. Another holds a stick like it's a spear, frozen mid-play. You almost stop there. He brings them home. One day, his people get lost in the forest. The strongest among them panic, but the boy knows the moss always grows on the north side of the trees. Quirky fact, some ancient cultures honoured their storytellers so much that they were buried with specially carved mouthpieces or voice symbols. Not warriors, not chiefs, storytellers. The girl who helped rebuild the shelter nudges you with her crutch, but you add one more line, and from then on, the boy didn't walk behind the tribe, he led it. You feign confusion. What boy? Was that story about you? She grins, the slow one who saves everyone. You lean forward and toss another log on the fire. You raise an eyebrow. I said he was slow, not old. They laugh. Because the real trick isn't telling a good story. These children will grow up and face storms, fevers, broken bones, maybe worse. But tonight they go to sleep believing that even if they fall, even if they break, they can still lead. It's knowing why you're telling it, not one of speed or strength or hunting prowess. That's the legacy you're building now, but of resilience, observation, and soft, steady firelight in the darkest night. Wisdom. Not a dramatic one. No bear, no cliff, no heroic sacrifice. Just a quiet passing. The old woman with clouded eyes and crooked fingers doesn't wake up. She's still curled in her usual place, near the back wall, blanket up to her chin, like she's just taking one of her long naps. But this time she doesn't stir. There's a death in the clan. No one says much at first. A silence falls over the shelter that feels heavier than snow on a half-broken roof. You knew her. Of course you did. She didn't say it like a comfort. She was one of the first to speak up for you after your injury, grunted approval when you made your first bone needle, handed you the better scraps of hide when she thought no one was looking. She told you once that her own brother walked with a twisted spine and still outlived 3 hunters. She said it like a fact. Historians still argue whether this reverence was symbolic, spiritual, or practical. But what's clear is that death was never just an ending. It was a transference, a way of reinforcing community identity. So today, you help dig. Mainstream fact. Archaeological finds, like the Shanidar skeletons in Iraq, show deliberate burial of disabled individuals, sometimes with flowers or pigments, suggesting early humans had not just rituals, but affectionate remembrance for the weak or wounded. You lean on a stick. Your good leg throbs Your bad one is just numb, but you keep going. Every handful of earth is a memory. By the time the grave is ready, your hands are shaking. You remember her way of sucking her teeth when someone lied, the way she told stories without moving her mouth, the way she sat with her hand on your shoulder when you thought you wouldn't make it through that first winter. But it's yours. It's not much. She's wrapped in her favorite furs. Around her neck is a string of beads. Nothing fancy, but strung by her grandchildren. You place a small basket near her feet. It holds a bone needle, a bit of dried meat, and a knotted cord you made last season. And maybe that's enough. Quirky note, some prehistoric burials included tools or symbolic items that didn't belong to the dead, but to the living. Gifts given as a mark of connection, not just tribute. Later, when the others return to their tasks, you sit alone by the gravesite. The cold creeps in. The sky bruises into dusk. You whisper something you're not sure she can hear. Not words, just presence. You're not good at grief. You don't weep, wail, or sing. And somehow that feels right. But you stay. And now it's your turn to pass it on. Not just knowledge. Because maybe that's what people like you have always done. Not led the hunt or the songs, but held the line when things fell apart. And quiet strength. Not just stories, but presence. Snow falls again the next morning. Not the heavy, angry kind that buries tools and hides trails, but the soft, whispering kind. It lands in delicate sheets across the clearing, like nature is trying to hush the world after yesterday's goodbye. The kind that survives even the longest nights. Your joints ache, your back pops when you roll over, but something in you insists today is not for resting. Today is for passing it on. You wake early. You just nod. You don't say good morning. You limp to the pile of sinew and bone splinters near the fire. She's already there. Your apprentice. Your co-survivor. The one with the bent knee and sharp eyes. She's sorting tools, checking edges, counting knots. She nods back. Mainstream fact. Studies of early toolkits show refinement over time. Blades that curve to better fit the palm, hooks designed for weak grip, needles fine enough for fur stitching. Archaeologists suspect that many of these adjustments were made by or for individuals with physical limitations. Innovation through necessity. You sit beside her and begin teaching, not just what to do, but why. You explain the way bone flexes before it breaks, how certain hides stretch better when cold, which knots hold under tension, and which ones don't survive the rain. She listens, asks, tries, fails, tries again. You correct her gently. Quirky fact. One prehistoric cave painting in El Castillo, Spain, features a series of negative handprints, some unusually small, others with missing or malformed fingers. Some anthropologists believe these prints may belong to disabled clan members signing their presence into history, because someone once did the same for you. She shows you a knot she's redone 3 times. This one holds. She beams. You grunt in approval. Then she does something odd. She reaches into the pouch tied at her waist and pulls out a tiny carved figure, a bear with a chipped paw. She hands it to you without a word. You turn it over. It's simple, rough, maybe only half finished, but it's you. You laugh, quietly. Well, sort of. It's hunched, has one thick leg and one narrow one, and its eyes are squinted like it just got asked to babysit the whole tribe. Then you tuck it into the pouch around your own neck. Historians still argue whether prehistoric carvings were toys, idols, or totems. Maybe they were all 3. Maybe they were gifts. Maybe they were thank yous. You lean back, watching her thread another sinew into a bone needle. Her fingers are clumsy, but determined. You remember when your fingers were the same. When someone sat beside you in the snow, even though you were slow. When someone gave you a reason to keep making things, even when you didn't think they'd last. And now, it's happening again. Not because of glory, not because of strength, but because survival is a chain, and today you're no longer the end of it. You're a link in the middle. Later that week, the sky clears briefly. The sun pushes through a gap in the clouds, golden and sharp, like a spear of warmth stabbing through the cold. It doesn't last long, but it's enough to melt the top layer of snow and turn the camp into a slush pit of soggy hides, sticky footprints, and laughter. Because the children are playing. Yes, laughter. They've invented some absurd game involving a bent branch, a ball of frozen moss, and a lot of yelling. You watch from the edge of the fire, wrapped in a fur that smells like smoke and dried fish, your stick propped across your lap like a king's scepter. They shout, slip, tackle, throw. And one of them, your apprentice, stands near the edge, leaning on her crutch, eyes sharp. She doesn't chase, but she directs, yells instructions, corrects mistakes. You smile. Mainstream fact. Some anthropologists believe that early human societies valued individuals who could observe and communicate, not just hunt or run. The invention of tools, art, and language may have depended more on watchers than on warriors. Teaches strategy. She catches you watching. Want to play. Raises an eyebrow. You toss it back. Slow, deliberate, high arc. One of the boys fumbles it, falls backward into a pile of wet skins, and erupts into dramatic fake groans like he's been gored by a mammoth. You grunt. I've done enough limping this decade. She grins, throws the moss ball at you anyway. It hits your chest and lands in your lap with a splat. You roll your eyes. The other kids cheer. You shuffle closer to the game, not to join. Your joints have unionized against sudden movement, but to watch and advise. Everyone howls. Quirky fact, cave etchings in Lascaux and Chauvet not only depict animals and hunts, but also curious, almost playful markings. Some historians speculate these may be early forms of games, riddles, or ritual humour meant to teach or bond the clan. Because now, that's your role. Not the strongest, not the fastest, but the strategist, the memory, the angle checker, the one who sees the game for what it really is. Practice for chaos. She tosses the ball again. It hits another kid square in the face. There's silence, then a snort. Historians still argue whether laughter was a luxury or a necessity in the Stone Age. But looking around at mud-covered children and giggling elders, you're pretty sure it was both. Then a wave of laughter so loud it startles the birds from the trees. You feel her sit beside you, wet cloak squishing against your leg. They listen to you, she says. You nod. Why? And then you answer honestly. You think a moment. Because I'm still here. You're still here. And sometimes just surviving long enough to be seen becomes its own kind of authority. That's it. That's the reason. That night, the storm returns. It rolls over the hills like a dark animal, dragging clouds with claws of lightning. Thunder growls low and steady, as if the earth itself is murmuring old threats. The shelter creaks. Cold air snakes in through gaps in the walls, nipping at toes and eyelids. But inside, you're warm. The fire is alive. The kids are tucked in. Your apprentice is curled against the wall with the others, clutching her crutch like it's a stuffed mammoth. You sit at the edge of the circle, where the flicker barely reaches, wrapped in a pelt that still smells of the river it came from, or warm enough. You're remembering. You're not sleepy, because nights like this used to mean fear, not just of the storm, but of being useless, of being the one left behind, of being a weight on the tribe. Mainstream fact, anthropologists suggest that fear of exclusion may be deeply wired into the human brain, because for most of prehistory, isolation often meant death. Our social instincts are survival mechanisms, not just preferences. You used to lie awake, listening to storms like this, wondering if the clan would decide you were more risk than reward. if one day someone would accidentally forget to wake you before a migration. Because earlier today you taught the children how to rewrap their foot hides when they get too wet. You fixed a cracked cooking stone with resin and moss. You told a story about constellations, stars shaped like spears, mammoths, and one very stubborn fox. Historians still argue whether nomadic groups practiced intentional abandonment of the weak, or if those stories are just projections from modern cynicism. But even if the fear wasn't always real, it felt real enough. Tonight, though, you're not afraid. You're necessary. And you caught your apprentice whispering it later to one of the little ones, in her own words. So no, you're not afraid. The fire pops. Quirky fact, in some ancient Arctic communities, elders who could no longer travel would volunteer to remain behind during migrations, but were often left with food, stories, and symbolic tokens from the clan, honouring their role as memory keepers. You stir it gently, not to stoke it, but to keep yourself moving. Stillness is the enemy of warmth. Can't sleep? Your apprentice stirs. You shake your head. She sits up, rubbing her eyes. Want me to tell you a story? She laughs. No, it's about a hunter with only one leg. You raise an eyebrow. It better not involve moss balls. Nope, she says. He becomes the bear. Oh, I've heard that one, you say. He gets eaten by a bear. You blink, then chuckle. Go on then. Her voice is soft, halting at first, but gains rhythm. And she does. The others don't wake, but they shift in their sleep, as if the words ripple through them like warmth. The storm growls louder outside, but in here, the walls hold. Because tonight, your story isn't the only one in the room anymore. And the words hold even stronger. The torch has passed and it burns clean and bright. Morning arrives without fanfare. The storm, like most bullies, made a lot of noise, but left quietly. You step outside into a world transformed, trees frosted white, the air so cold it bites your nose hairs, and snow crunching beneath your feet like the bones of tiny ghosts. Everything is slower in this weather, and yet the clan moves. One of the hunters twists his ankle in the slush. Another has frostbite creeping along the edge of his ear. The shaman has a cough that sounds like it was handed down by his grandfather. And your apprentice. She's limping more than usual today, but she's still up, still helping string traps. Her hands red from snow, but her face stubborn. Mainstream fact, archaeological digs have revealed communal shelters with intricate partitions and storage spaces, indicating that survival wasn't a solo sport. It was deeply cooperative. People shared burdens, resources, even pain. You catch her eye. She gives a quick nod. No words, just the look that says, yeah, I hurt, so what? You know that look. You invented it. You offer her a bit of dried meat. She accepts, bites into it like it owes her money. Don't push too hard, you murmur. She grins. Too late. She disappears into the trees. You don't follow. Not because you can't, but because you've taught her how to return. Historians still argue whether clans had formal teaching roles, but the passing of survival knowledge through repeated observed behaviour suggests mentorship was baked into daily life, and often it wasn't the fastest or strongest doing the teaching. It was the ones who had learned the hard way. You sit on a log, wrap your furs tighter, and pull out a bit of sinew and a half-carved figure from your pouch. It's not a bear this time, it's a fox, the stubborn kind. Your fingers are slow today, but that's fine. The work still gets done. Quirky detail. In some ancient traditions, totems and figurines weren't just symbols. There were focal points for concentration, like prehistoric fidget toys that grounded the mind and soothed the nerves. You finish the fox. Tuck it away, lean back and listen. Bird song. A distant whoop. Someone caught something. A muffled laugh from inside the shelter. And underneath it all, the quiet crackle of a tribe moving forward. with you in it, still needed, still trusted, still building, even if your tools now look more like wisdom than stone. The next few days bring a thaw, not a full one, just enough for the ground to breathe again, and for your knees to start hurting in new ways. Mud replaces snow, the air smells like wet bark and mammoth dung, which is somehow an improvement. With the change in weather comes change in mood. The clan is restless, people argue more, someone accidentally burns a chunk of meat, and a dramatic monologue ensues about how that was the best piece. You sit nearby, chewing on the second best, and watching the drama unfold like a bored emperor. Your apprentice plops down beside you, drops a bundle of half-frozen berries into your lap. You're welcome. I prefer them on a silver platter. She snorts. Eat them before they rot. You do. They're sour, and your tongue thanks you with a full-body shiver. Mainstream fact, early humans often relied on seasonal foraging, not just for food, but for medicine. Some berries acted as anti-inflammatories, others as mild antibiotics. And many were discovered by, guess who? The slower, observant ones, who had time to notice. She pulls out her crutch and starts carving something into the wood. What's that? You ask. A snake with legs. That's not a thing. Maybe it was, before you got old. You chuckle. Bold words from someone who still trips over pine cones. You sit in companionable silence as she carves. The tribe buzzes around you, tension in the air. The thaw means travel, migration, decisions. You've seen this before. Every year, the same questions rise. Do we stay longer? Do we move early? Is the ice upstream thin or thick? Historians still argue whether these decisions were made by consensus, hierarchy, or sheer stubbornness. But one thing's clear, everyone looked to the elders when the world got uncertain. And lately, they've been looking at you. You don't lead, you don't command, but you do speak when it matters. And when you speak, people listen. That's new. Quirky fact. In one Siberian site, archaeologists found a burial where the body had been propped into a seated position, surrounded by offerings, and with a speaking stick carved from bone. Some interpret this as a sign of a tribal advisor, a memory keeper, perhaps someone like you. You feel the crutch tap your arm. She holds up the snake. See? You tilt your head. Looks like a hairy worm. Exactly. You both laugh, and for a moment, the restlessness lifts. Because in the middle of uncertainty, there's still time to carve something dumb into a stick. Still time to make jokes. Still time to teach. Still time. By week's end, the decision is made. You're moving. The thaw revealed something unsettling. Wolf tracks. Fresh. Close. Too close. One of the mothers found a half-eaten hare just meters from the outer shelters. Not a kill. A message. You've seen this before. When predators stop hiding, it's because they've decided you're prey. So the clan packs. Quietly. Efficiently. Hides are rolled. Stones are buried in fire pits for future warmth. Everyone moves with practiced hands and restless eyes. Everyone except you. You sit on your stone near the fire, watching the ritual unfold, like a slow exhale. And when the chieftain kneels in front of you, brow furrowed, hands calloused, you already know what he's going to ask. Can you walk it? Mainstream fact. In certain prehistoric groups, migration wasn't optional. It was seasonal, survival-based, and unforgiving. The weak were either carried or left. Your knee throbs just thinking about it. You glance at your apprentice. She's across the camp, tying bundles, balancing on one leg like a flamingo made of fury. Yes, you say. He nods, doesn't question it, because he knows you'll find a way. That night, you prep. You reinforce your cane with extra sinew, patch the seams of your boots, pack light, just your knife, your fox figurine, and a bundle of stories stored neatly in your skull. The air hums with anticipation. You feel it in your teeth. Quirky fact, some nomadic clans had a role known as the path teller, not the navigator, but the rememberer. The one who knew which river flooded early, which valley held shade, which slope hid thorns. Sometimes these were elders, sometimes the injured, always the ones who watched. You don't sleep. You sit by the coals, feeding them tiny sticks, whispering directions to yourself. Not because you doubt the scouts, but because you've walked this route 50 winters ago. And some memories don't fade, even when muscles do. Historians still argue whether ancient migrations followed strict patterns or were improvisational dances with nature. Likely both. But tonight, the plan is simple. Head east. Avoid the ridge. Cross the stream before sunrise. Dawn cracks like an egg, and the march begins. You move slowly, deliberately, leaning hard on your cane. But you move. Because they didn't leave you, and you refused to give them a reason to. The path east is unforgiving. Mud that sucks your feet like it's trying to taste you. Thorned bushes that grab your clothes like needy toddlers. And worst of all, those smug, overachieving birds who chirp like they invented migration. You grunt with every step, but the clan moves as one, and they make space for you. One of the boys, the quiet one with the bent wrist, keeps dropping behind to walk beside you. He doesn't say much, just hums weird songs and hands you pine needles to chew when you look like you're about to pass out. Mainstream fact. Pine needles contain vitamin C. It's not a lot, but in a world without oranges, chewing a few could help prevent scurvy. Survival came in weird flavors. Eventually, you reach the resting spot. A shallow dip in the valley, shielded from wind, near a stream still half frozen. Everyone collapses into their routines. Fires, skins, grumbling about sore backs, and someone snoring. You sit. Every joint is a war zone. But you're here, and that means everything. Your apprentice flops down beside you, red-faced, mud-streaked, and triumphant. You didn't die, she says, as if disappointed. You smile. That's tomorrow's plan. She laughs, then holds up something small, one of your bootlaces, snapped clean in half. Found it dragging behind you, tied it back. You take it. It's warm from her hand. You tuck it into your pouch like a treasure. Quirky fact. In some Neanderthal sites, small bundles of twisted sinew were found buried alongside individuals. Some theorize they were personal talismans, items imbued with meaning, not function, objects that said I was here. The night is cold, but clear, and as you lie down beneath the stars, aches singing lullabies in every limb, you realize something strange. You're not thinking about the pain. You're thinking about the boy with the songs, the apprentice with the crutch, the path you remembered, and the one still ahead. Historians still argue whether disabled individuals slowed their groups down or simply changed the rhythm. You changed it, and they're still dancing to it. You wake before the sun. Your bones protest like grumpy elders, but your mind hums with quiet purpose. Around you, the camp still sleeps, save for the firekeepers, who nod at you in that half-asleep, half-respectful way, reserved for those who've seen too many winters. You stretch, sort of. Your leg doesn't stretch exactly. It negotiates, but it gets there. Then you do something you haven't done in a long time. You walk the perimeter, not far, just enough to scan the tree line, feel the air, sniff for anything wrong. And nothing feels wrong, which is almost disappointing. Back at camp, your apprentice is already up, poking at a pan of something burnt and ambitious. She grins when she sees you. Breakfast. You eye the charcoal mess. I'll risk starvation. Mainstream fact. Early morning routines in nomadic groups were often tied to practical rituals, checking traps, prepping gear, or scanning for tracks. But they also served a psychological purpose, orienting yourself in a world that never stopped trying to kill you. You sit beside her anyway. She tosses a pebble at your foot. You're limping less. I'm limping differently. It's an art. She laughs, then pulls something from her pouch. It's the crutch, but she's carved more into it, a winding trail of symbols. Some you recognize, some you don't. What's this? Map, she says, of everywhere we've been. You trace a spiral. This one? Our old cave. This? The place I fell in the river. And this? You ask, pointing to a mark shaped like an eye. She pauses. That's where I saw you cry. You blink. Then nod. Fair. Quirky fact. In some tribal societies, memory sticks were used, long pieces of carved wood marked with symbols to record migrations, births, deaths. Not writing, exactly, but not far off. The rest of the clan stirs. Another day of walking ahead. But for once it doesn't feel daunting, because as you hold the crutch, and her not quite breakfast, and the soft rustling of morning all around, you realize you've become something new. Not just the one who survived, but the one who remembers, and ensures others do too. The terrain shifts again, from muddy trails to rocky ground, from wide skies to tree-choked paths, where the sun barely makes it through. You march with the others, step by careful step, the crunch of leaves beneath your boots, like a quiet drumbeat that reminds you, yes, you're still here. Your leg protests, your back negotiates, but your will, that's the only thing not up for discussion. You pause now and then, not because you're tired, you are, but because you notice things others don't. A patch of moss too fresh, a snapped twig that points the wrong direction, a strange silence that means something lives nearby, or just left. Mainstream fact. Many ancient survivalists operated in what modern psychologists call a hyper-vigilant flow state, a mode of constant attention, sharpened by necessity. And guess who developed it best? Those who couldn't run, so had to sense. You're the sensor now. Your apprentice doesn't even ask anymore. When you stop, she stops. When you raise your hand, she crouches. You're not just surviving, you're leading. Quietly, carefully, instinctively. Midday, the clan stops at a river. Everyone cheers, splashing, refilling water skins. Some of the younger ones wrestle in the shallows, which ends with someone crying and someone else saying, "I told you it was cold." You sit under a tree, savouring the breeze and the scent of pine and whetstone. Your fox figurine sits in your palm, warm from the touch. Your apprentice sits beside you, silent for once. After a while, she says, "You ever think we'll find a place where we stop walking?" You don't answer right away, because you have, and the answer is no. Quirky fact. Archaeologists have found stone tools buried in places hundreds of miles from the materials used to make them, suggesting vast migratory patterns, some spanning generations. Movement wasn't a phase, it was the rhythm of life. Historians still argue whether ancient people ever truly settled or simply paused between movements. You lean your head back against the tree. Stopping's not the point, you say, but resting, that's sacred. She nods slowly, then promptly falls asleep on your shoulder. You don't move, because right now this is the destination. A pause, a breath, a reminder that, even in motion, you can still belong. By the time you reach the new valley, your cane is half a twig and your boots are more patch than hide. But you made it. You stand at the ridge, looking down at the soft green bowl of land ahead, trees like sleepy giants, a river curling lazily through the center, and a low rise perfect for shelters, the kind of place where a clan might stay a while, hunt, laugh, heal, the kind of place where even someone like you can breathe without looking over your shoulder. The clan begins setting up immediately. Fires rekindled, stones arranged in rings, meat hung to dry, life resuming at speed. You limp down the slope at your own pace, cane dragging a line in the earth behind you, a slow, scratched record of the miles you've survived. Your apprentice runs ahead. Of course she does, and starts directing people twice her size with the confidence of a mammoth trainer. She glances back occasionally, making sure you're still following. You roll your eyes and keep walking. Mainstream fact: in ancient burial sites like Shanidar Cave, individuals with major injuries lived for years after what would have been fatal trauma without social support. This means something important. Care wasn't transactional, it was cultural, embedded in the tribe. At the edge of camp, the boy with the songs is carving something into a flat stone. You step closer, squinting. It's your cane, not the object, the image of it. A spiral running up its shaft, the crooked handle exaggerated like a snake's head. "What's that?" you ask. He shrugs. "Story, mine?" "Everyone's," he says. "You just carried it." Quirky fact: petroglyphs, stone carvings found all over the world, often include symbols historians believe represented individuals. Not names, not egos, just stories worth remembering. You smile, sit beside him, the fire crackles. Behind you, the clan begins to sing. And for once, it's not a song of leaving. It's a song of arrival. Historians still argue whether the disabled in prehistory were burdens or proof that the tribe was strong enough to carry everyone. You don't argue. You just sit there, listening, and slowly, you fade into the quiet hum of night. The stars blink gently above you, scattered like forgotten embers across the deep blue ceiling of the world. The fire has died down to warm orange coals, each one a soft heartbeat in the darkness. Your breath slows. The cold isn't cruel tonight. It wraps around you like a blanket that smells of pine and ash and old stories. Someone hums near the river, maybe your apprentice, maybe the wind. Your cane rests beside you now, no longer a tool of survival, but a relic of the path you chose to walk. Its wood worn smooth, shaped by every stumble, every pause, every stubborn refusal to stop moving. The earth beneath you is soft. It cradles your weight like it's known you forever. The clan settles. One by one voices fade, movement stills, the hush stretches long and kind. And here in this moment, between the past and the morning to come, you feel something rare. Stillness, peace, the sense that everything, every limp, every laugh, every hard-won breath mattered. Because you mattered. You were seen, you were held, and now the fire of memory glows quietly around you, a circle unbroken. So rest now, traveller of time, let the ache drain from your bones. Let the stories hold you like arms that never let go. You're home, you're remembered, and the night is finally safe.